The galaxy was loud with warnings, across countless systems, through old stellar trade networks and deep quantum pulses. A single message echoed in dozens of tongues. Don't go to Earth. It was carved into the memory of dying empires, whispered by ancient machines orbiting long-dead stars, even scratched into the stone of a drifting moon that hadn't hosted life for 3 billion years. All of them said the same thing. Don't go to Earth. But the Velarin Empire was never one to listen. They were proud, powerful, and absolutely certain that there was no threat in the galaxy they couldn't handle. Their fleets were so massive they could block out a sun. Their weaponry could peel the crust off a planet in hours. Their scientists had cracked the language of the stars. So when they heard those strange warnings, they didn't feel fear. They felt curiosity. To the Empress, it sounded like a challenge. So they sent a scout ship, Golden Spire of Knowledge, to the backwater system the humans called Sol. One ship, one mission: study, observe, report. What they found wasn't what they expected. Earth wasn't advanced, at least not by galactic standards. The technology was decades, even centuries behind. Most of the planet was still arguing over resources, borders, beliefs. They hadn't united, hadn't reached for the stars the way the Velarin had. And yet there was something else, something that didn't show up in scans or genetic logs, something that unnerved even the most analytical minds aboard the Golden Spire. It was something about the people. They were chaotic, yes, violent, often. But beneath that, there was something the Velarin couldn't quantify. A depth of emotion. A fire in their stubbornness. A kind of raw willpower that didn't make sense in the equations of empire. And then there was him, Jalen Thompson, 17 South Side Chicago. Just another face in a sea of humanity. No record, no wealth, no cosmic fate. Just a kid trying to make it through the day, headphones on, head down, dreams locked away somewhere between his morning routine and the sound of train doors closing behind him. He didn't know he was being watched, not by the cameras, not by the people who ignored him, but by something far above, something not from Earth, something hidden in orbit, cloaked behind interference so advanced that even Earth's best satellites couldn't catch a whisper. The Velarin had noticed him. It started with a gesture, simple, human. A packed train car. Hot and swaying through the tunnels, people pressed together like grains in a jar. Pregnant woman stepped on, white mid-30s, tired eyes and a hand resting on her swollen belly. Nobody moved, nobody even looked at her, except Jalen. Without a word, he stood up. She hesitated, surprised, then sat. What happened next? Changed everything. She handed him a note. Just a folded piece of paper worn at the edges like it had been in her bag a while. No fanfare, no speech. She just smiled, one of those quiet, knowing smiles that stay with you, and stepped off the train 2 stops later. Jalen unfolded it. At first, the words didn't make sense. They weren't even all in English. Symbols, patterns, numbers in strange sequences. But then the last line caught him. You've been seen. Be ready. That's when the headache started. Up in orbit, the observers panicked. Something was changing. Human biosignatures don't shift like that, not without tech. But Jalen's neural patterns had just spiked beyond what even enhanced species normally hit in training simulations. His body wasn't evolving. His mind was. And it wasn't just him. On every continent, scattered across random neighborhoods, parks, shelters, alleyways, and high-rise offices, others were awakening. Not with power, not with magic, but with understanding. A pattern was forming, a signal, something ancient, something hidden deep in Earth's forgotten places was responding to the presence of Velarin minds, because Earth had secrets, and the warnings, they weren't about humanity's cruelty or its warlike past. They weren't about nuclear weapons or environmental collapse. No, the warnings were about what happens when you touch the spark. What happens when someone sees a moment of kindness, not power, and chooses it anyway. What happens when a forgotten kid gives up his seat? What happens when that kid starts to hear voices, and some of them aren't human? The Velaran Empire had always believed strength came from dominance, from control. But on Earth, strength came from something they didn't understand yet. And now, it might be too late. Because Jalen wasn't alone, and the galaxy was about to remember why they were warned. Next stop, the world starts watching. Jalen couldn't shake the feeling. The note sat folded in his hoodie pocket, heavy like it was made of stone, not paper. His fingers kept brushing against it, like part of him needed to be sure it was still there. He didn't show it on his face. He'd learned not to, but inside his thoughts were spinning in every direction. You've been seen. Be ready. What did that even mean? Who wrote that? And why did it feel like the words weren't just written but meant for him? Personal, direct, like a whisper that had waited years just to find his ear. He didn't tell anyone about the woman, or the note. He didn't even try to search the symbols online. Something told him, don't, not yet. Instead, he walked home that day more alert than usual, not paranoid exactly, just aware, like he'd stepped into some current underneath the normal world, and now everything had a second layer. Streetlights flickered when he passed. Coincidence. The old man on the corner looked at him a beat too long before turning away. And the sky, gray, overcast, felt lower than usual, like the clouds were pressing down hard on the city, trying to keep something in. That night, Jalen dreamed of stars, not a sky full of them. Just one, huge, burning white. And under it stood a woman in armor that didn't belong to any time or place he'd ever seen. Gold and black, fluid and sharp at once. Her eyes were like mirrors. She didn't speak, just looked at him, then pointed behind her. Jalen turned. The earth was cracked open like a shell, something ancient crawling out of its center, and he couldn't tell if it was a machine or a creature or both. But he could feel it watching him, even in the dream. He woke up sweating. He didn't remember getting out of bed, but he found himself standing by the window, hands clenched on the sill, staring at the stars beyond the streetlights. Something was watching. He could feel it, like pressure behind his eyes, like something trying to measure him. Far above, cloaked in perfect silence, the golden spire of knowledge had shifted position. They were tracking more than him now. Other humans were triggering the same anomaly. The Velaran called it cognitive flare. Bursts of neural energy that should have been impossible without external stimulation or technology. But Earthlings, especially certain kinds, were showing them naturally. It was happening mostly in unpredictable populations, kids in foster care, elders with dementia, who suddenly remembered things no one taught them, people deep in grief, deep in love, or in states of extreme emotion. And always after some small human act, a hand held too long, a stranger comforted, a child rescued from danger. They had no explanation, but the behavior was consistent. The more empathy shown, the more the flare. It didn't add up. Humans weren't supposed to be ready. They weren't even a Type 1 civilization by galactic standards. But the data was clear. Earth wasn't primitive. It was locked. On purpose. And now it was waking up. The scientists aboard the Velaran ship disagreed about what to do. Some wanted to report back immediately. Others insisted they needed to stay, learn more. But one of them, a junior observer named Tevek, was worried. He'd grown up on war stories. His father served in the expansion fleets during the burnings of Taumilar, where 3 advanced species fell in days. The message was always clear: strength wins. Yet here, on a planet considered barely relevant, Tevek felt something he'd never known before. Doubt. He kept watching Jalen. The boy moved like someone used to being invisible. Quick, quiet, polite, but not timid. There was something behind his eyes, something thoughtful. A calculation. Not the kind you learn in school, but the kind that comes from living around sharp corners, knowing when to speak, when to listen, and when to disappear. On the 3rd day after the train ride, things changed. Jalen saw her again. The woman from the train. He was walking past the old library on 63rd, earphones in, when he spotted her, across the street, leaning on a cane now, watching him. She wasn't pregnant anymore, or maybe she never was. But it was her. Same face. Same eyes. She nodded once, then turned and walked into the alley beside the library. Jalen hesitated. His gut screamed not to go, but his feet moved anyway. He followed. The alley was empty. She was gone. But there, taped to the side of a rusted dumpster, was another note. Same handwriting, same paper. Good. You're listening. Now look up. He did, and for the first time in his life, Jalen saw it. Not just stars. There was something else in the sky. Just a flicker, like a shimmer behind a curtain. But it was there. And as he stared, something in his chest pulsed. Not pain, not fear, but connection, like something ancient was unfolding in him. Behind that shimmer, the Velaran panicked. The ship's cloaking tech had never failed. But Jalen saw them. He saw them, and that broke everything they thought they knew. Earth's veil is weakening, Tavik muttered. His voice shook. We're not observing a species, we're awakening a force, another scientist scoffed. You're jumping at shadows. No, Tavik said. We lit a fuse. And back on Earth, Jalen turned away from the sky. Because something in the alley had changed. The air felt heavier now, like it had shape. And from the shadows, a soft glow began to build. Not bright, not harsh, just steady. Like fireflies weaving through air that remembered magic. He didn't run. He just stood there, waiting. Somewhere deep underground, an old mechanism stirred. And far above, for the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy began to remember the truth about Earth. Not a cradle, not a backwater, but a lockbox. And it was opening. Jalen didn't talk to anyone the rest of the day. Not his mom, not his little cousin who kept trying to show him a dance from TikTok, not even Mr. Green from downstairs who always asked about school like he was checking if Jalen still had plans. Beyond this block, he just went straight to his room, locked the door, and sat on the edge of his bed. That glow in the alley, it hadn't faded. It had followed him. Not literally. Not like a beam of light or anything he could point to, but it was there, inside him like a hum in his bones. Every sound, every shadow, every person he passed since then felt sharper, like he was tuning into something under the surface. He didn't know what it was, but it felt old, like it had waited a long time to be noticed. He unfolded the second. Note again. You're listening. Now look up. It didn't feel like a message from the woman anymore. It felt like something else was speaking through her, using her. Like she was part of whatever this was, but not in charge of it. And that's what scared him most. He wasn't just caught up in something strange. He was being drawn in, across the city, and far beyond it. Others were feeling it too. In a foster home on the edge of Detroit, a 7-year-old girl named Maya stared at the night sky, whispering equations in her sleep. Formulas no one had taught her, drawn from languages older than writing. In Brazil, a street musician who had never touched a computer before suddenly started building something from scrap metal, something with an energy source that registered on 2 weather satellites as a burst of unexplainable heat. And in Nairobi, a former soldier-turned-mechanic touched a rusted engine, then began drawing symbols in the oil on the ground. He didn't know why, only that his dreams were no longer his own. The Velaran knew something was happening. But even with all their technology, they couldn't stop it. Their long-range scans showed energy signatures rising all across Earth, but the sources were organic people, regular humans who were starting to connect to something. The scientists called it the signal. No one could explain it. No one knew who had started it, and no one could control it. The Empire debated pulling out, quietly. They hadn't made official contact yet. They could still vanish, pretend they were never there. But some argued that leaving now could be even worse, because Earth was responding, and not like a planet under attack, like a system waking up defenses or memories. One Velaran diplomat, Counselor Venhara, had studied lost civilizations for most of her life. She had heard rumors, buried, in deep forbidden archives, of planets sealed for reasons beyond war or contagion, planets left alone not because they were dangerous now, but because they once were. Earth is not a child civilization, she told her command. It is a prisoner in its own skin, and somehow Jalen Thompson had just found the key. He didn't know that, of course, not yet, but he was starting to feel it. The next day at school, everything felt wrong. Too normal. The same cracked tiles, the same lukewarm trays in the cafeteria, the same teachers going through motions like their hearts were somewhere else. But Jalen was different now, and something inside him kept listening, to the buzz of electricity through walls, to the cough of a kid 2 rows behind him, to the quiet ripple of emotion behind every face. That's when the substitute showed up. She said her name was Ms. Aaron, said she'd be covering for Mr. Kalin, who'd had an emergency. But Mr. Kalin never missed a day. Jalen knew something was off the moment she walked in. She moved like a person, talked like a person. But her eyes didn't look. They scanned, and when her gaze passed over Jalen, it paused. Just a second too long, like she was checking a reading only she could. See, Jalen lowered his head and pretended to scroll through his tablet. But his pulse kicked up. He wasn't the only one being watched. Later that afternoon, Tevek got the data feed. The Empire had quietly inserted field agents into several locations on Earth, embedded in human disguises, testing proximity to flare. Candidates. Ms. Aaron was one of them. But something was wrong. Her latest transmission came garbled, distorted by static. And then, silence. No signal. Vanished. Tevek replayed her last video. She had been in a classroom. Nothing unusual at first, but in the last few seconds before the feed cut, the students looked toward Jalen. Not at him, but around him. Like they were seeing something invisible. Their expressions went from bored to confused to afraid. And then the camera blinked out. Back in Chicago, Jalen left school early. He didn't tell anyone. Just walked out. Something in his chest was burning, like heat radiating out from behind his ribs. The hallway lights flickered as he passed. Outside, the wind picked up. The weather said calm, but the trees bent like a storm was building. He ducked into a small park nearby. Empty except for a kid on the swing and a woman pushing a stroller. And yet, it didn't feel empty. He could feel a presence. "Okay," he said under his breath, standing near the edge of the basketball court. "You're here, so just say something." Nothing, just the wind. He turned. The woman with the stroller was gone. So was the kid. The whole park was suddenly silent, like time had paused. A soft voice spoke behind him. Not from a mouth, but from inside his thoughts. "You are being shaped. You must choose the shape." He spun around, but there was no one there. Just the swing swaying slowly, creaking, in the wind. Far above, the Velaran fleet finally received a message, one not in their language, not in any known galactic dialect. But it hit every ship's core systems at once, crashing sensors and flooding neural links. Just 4 words. "You were warned before." And then a second pulse hit. This time it wasn't just a message, it was a memory. Not theirs. Humanity's. Broadcast into every listening mind. A memory of something buried. A war not of armies, but of ideas. Of entities that once ruled through thoughts, feelings, and dreams. And Earth had been the battlefield. Now it was stirring again. Jalen felt it first. A tear in his mind. Not painful, not frightening, just open. Something ancient looking through. And all around him, the sky darkened. Midday fading to twilight. As if the world itself knew. This was only the beginning.